Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, I am thrilled to bring you my interview with the one and only Gates McFadden. I got to talk to Dr. Crusher herself about her new podcast, InvestiGates, as well as Star Trek, her time choreographing Muppets, and much, much more. It's an absolute joy of an interview. I can't wait to share it with you. So here we go. Hi, this is Les.
Well, hello, Les. This is Gates.
Thank you so much for making time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm absolutely looking forward to talking to you and looking forward to the podcast. Obviously, all of my friends and I think most of my listeners probably know you from Star Trek. I am having to keep myself from just asking Henson questions. I saw an interview once with LeVar Burton where he said he could look out into an audience and he knew whether you were going to ask him about Roots or whether you were going to ask him about Reading Rainbow or whether you were going to ask him about Trek. And I was
it's true. It's true. But you know what? It's a gift. Come on, that people are interested. Good heavens, I'm flattered that anyone would even ask a question.
Well, and getting to talk to people about things that are interesting and that people are interested in, I feel like is half the fun of this. And you just got into it yourself. When I started doing interviews for my podcast, I watched a ton of interviews. I listened to Terry Gross and tried to tease out what I liked better about some than others, and where I like the questions. And I kind of came down on the side that if the other person is interested in what they're doing and engaged in their career, their life, their whatever we're talking about, everything is interesting when nerded out to a sufficient degree for me, basically. I have found that almost everybody who's really interested in a thing is absolutely a blast to talk to. When you set out to do this, and we're going to be, going through your Rolodex for folks to talk to, and I knew you wouldn't just pick through Star Trek episodes. What did you set out to have the goals be for your conversations on InvestiGates?
It was, I didn't go into it that way. I actually had been asked by Nacelle, by Brian Volk Weiss. Mm-hmm. He's the one who came up with the idea of wanting. He's a huge Star Trek fan, and he's just the greatest guy. I mean, he's the best boss you could ever have. But he's the one who started to ask me, I think you'd be great for this, to do a podcast, and, you could do it with your friends. And I'm like, wait a minute, Brian, hold on. None of my friends on Star Trek want to have a conversation with me about Star Trek. We don't talk about Star Trek. And so it was very funny. He said, well, okay, you could talk about anything else, or what if you had other guests? And it took quite a lot of persuasion, actually. And then I had this funny thing where I went over. He had asked me. I turned it down twice, and it was kind of the last time he'd come back. And I realized that Gene Roddenberry had come back 3 times for Star Trek, and that changed my life, and it was the best decision I could have ever made. And so I thought, Gates, what is your problem? Why do you not say yes to people who are coming to you saying, I'll produce this for you? So I started to think about it, and I said yes, and I also, there was a dog, actually, who dared me to do it. I had 2 biscuits. It's true. It's a true story. I was with my friends on the porch. They had this dog who's very timid, very shy, had never let me touch it or had never taken a biscuit from me. And as a joke at the end, while I still didn't know what I was going to do, I said, okay, we'll have Luna decide. If she takes a biscuit from my left hand, I'm doing it. If she takes it from my right, I'm not doing it. And we didn't even know if she'd take a biscuit, right? She'd never done it before from my hand. And I swear to God, it was hilarious. It took her 2 minutes, and she kept going right to left and everything. And so it became this drama, like, who's behind the door? Is she going to do the podcast, ladies and gentlemen? And finally, at the last second, she was almost biting the right one, and she went to the left. And I went, well, I guess I'm doing the podcast. Okay. And then I called Brian that night and said, I'm doing it.
The dog
dared me to do it. I'm doing it. And I think, I was nervous in the beginning because the difference is if I was just going to be interviewing people who I find interesting in the world, they could be in any number of professions. It's different than doing it with your friends. See, we are friends, and so there's a whole different vibe. And then I was like, well, are we going to both talk equally? What am I going to, And so it became an exploration, basically. I think I was nervous in the beginning, and then I started to relax. And then I got more and more into each of these friends of mine, and I thought they are so interesting, and I wanted to just let them shine and talk about what really they wanted to talk about. And see, sometimes there was a real back and forth, and other times it wasn't a real back and forth. They would really just open up and start talking about something. But I have truly, truly enjoyed the whole process, and I'm still doing it. I mean, I've got 14 in the can, and I have some others that are scheduled, and I don't know how long it's going to go, but I'm learning enormously, and I have been doing the sound editing. I have learned how to edit. I don't have the final machines, but I spend hours and hours editing it down, and sometimes changing my mind and going, this is really, I should make this a double episode. There's so much great material here. So, I'm learning on my feet. I hope people enjoy it. I have really enjoyed doing it, and I'm totally surprised by how much fun I've had, actually. There are times when there's a couple of moments that I laughed so hard, and other moments that I've been really, there are some powerful moments that some people talk about on the show. So there you go. We'll see what people think of it. I hope people like it.
Well, like you said, when you're friends with people, I mean, for you and I, we've never met. This is the time we'll speak. And so there's not really an expectation of how Gates and Les hang out on a mic.
Right.
As opposed to when you sit down with your friends and then you realize, oh, we're not just hanging out. We're supposed to be doing a thing.
Exactly.
Were there any things that you started to do or kind of learned to do to set that space so that it wasn't so artificial?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously I had starts and stops on it. I think there were times where I felt, you learn that you don't have to work so hard to keep it going. But that's before you learn how to sound edit. You don't realize how you can, that dead air can just disappear. I think for Will, who is such an expert host himself, he has hosted so many podcasts and shows that I wanted to find a different format. So that's ended up being, I have a double episode with him because we just had so much material. But it's really a conversation with us, and I set it out like a game. So we start with Never Have I Ever, but we go into all sorts of questions, and it leads into other conversations and memories in our lives. And I learned so much about him. And I don't think I've ever shared some of the things that I shared on that episode. So that was really interesting. Also, it depends on what good your connection is. This was happening during the pandemic. So there were times when it was like, well, their Wi-Fi sucks, so it's going to be, there's going to be a delay no matter how hard we're trying to make this seem in person. And other times people came into the studio, even though we had masks and big shields around us. Brent was in the studio. Jonathan was in Maine. Will was in the studio. Nana was in the studio. But I think the rest, I mean, I would go on Zoom with people because then we could be laughing. It really helped having their, actually with a mask on, it was weird. So sometimes people took masks off, sometimes they didn't. But at home, when they were on Zoom, obviously we could see their full face. Yeah. I just have come off of it really cherishing my friendships with these people because they're really awesome people. And I don't mean just from Next Gen. All of the actors on all the shows, I feel a pretty remarkable community of human beings, which is what I'm counting first before even the acting. They're people who are really interested in the world and have interesting lives, and we talk about all kinds of subjects. And obviously, I had more than enough questions prepared, but I think it's a skill that I'm only learning of how to also let it open up more. So learning on my feet. And I think one of the hardest things for me was to have to listen to yourself.
Yes.
I mean, I was like, oh, my God, who is that woman? She's in all of them. Who is she? Can we get rid of her?
I like to think that nobody likes their own voice, that even Vin Diesel doesn't want to listen to himself, or so, that even people who are famous for just voice acting probably don't want to listen to themselves.
You have a great voice. You have a good voice for it.
Thank you. I know you... one of the things that always impressed me about Star Trek that I don't think really clicked for me when I was watching it as a teen or as a kid were the caliber of actors that were being cast on the show. You and Patrick Stewart, and there were people who were coming from these great theater backgrounds, and of course I only knew them from my space show. And,
right.
And as I've gotten older, I've kind of come to value that as something rather brilliant that I feel like Star Trek was doing, because it's very easy, I feel, on sci-fi shows, particularly one that is as utopian as Star Trek can be sometimes, to make it silly or to make it Buck Rogersy or to not take it seriously.
Right.
And that training, that ability to, you went from Mimo Dynamics to comedy dynamics here, but the movement training, the seriousness, the understanding the process. Your school did collaborative directing, if I'm recalling my research right, and lots of neat things to get into the process. And I love being able to bring that to something that that maybe gets written off as genre sometimes.
I agree. I think certainly for Next Gen, we all felt that. And then it turned out so many of the people were theater actors. I mean, there were many theater actors in Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And many of us knew each other from different theater work. But what was great, I think that's why Patrick was also the perfect captain, because he had done rep. He understood. I had not done rep in the way he had done rep. I would do shows in New York on stage, and they might run a while, but it wasn't like I was doing different repertory every night. Although you could be shooting something else during the day, that happened. But it was nice, and we learned how to also take those breaks and be absolutely silly, which in the beginning I think both Patrick and I were a little like, why, these people are laughing a lot on the set. And then you realize you need to do that. So you have to find the balance. And sometimes we were all very naughty, and sometimes we were all, we would be there, though, when it was action. And I think that was terrific. Somebody asked me this morning in another interview about EGBDF, which was a theater piece that we did, written by Tom Stoppard, with a full 80-piece orchestra. And Patrick asked, it was me, Colomini, Brent, and Jonathan, and a young boy who had been on the show. And we all did this, and we traveled to different cities doing it, and we had rehearsed on weekends at Paramount. They had let us use a room. And Patrick directed it, and that was pretty cool, too. So there were so many layers to this, and the part that certainly I had no clue about was the fan part. I was terrified in the beginning of conventions, appearances. I was the last one in my cast to do them. I think mainly because I had been stalked when I was younger, and I just, I didn't ever want to see this person again. But I finally, through getting to know fans and relaxing about it, I have come to appreciate Star Trek, all of it, so much, because when there are people who are now in their 30s and 40s who say they grew up watching it, and they're now, a geologist, or they're a surgeon, or they're whatever, and they talk about the impact, even if it's only like, I didn't get along with my parents, but the only show we watched was Star Trek. But that's very moving, because it's a show that, unlike where we are so much in our polarized society today, it gets you to think about an issue. About you can hold an ambivalence in your episode. You can say, well, there's symbiosis there. That's a planet of suppliers, and that's a planet of drug users. And what do you do about this? And you think about it from different sides. And there's not this normal judgment of that's bad, this is good. It's like, here's a situation, let's analyze it and look at it and think about it.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, a tremendous gift of Star Trek, that it gets people to think and to be curious and to be more inclusive. It's what we have to do. I mean, we have to be more inclusive and tolerant of each other and go forward, not backwards.
That leads right into my last question. I feel like you've been part of shows and fandoms and worlds that are foundational to a lot of us, whether it be Labyrinth or Dark Crystal or Muppet movies or Star Trek. You've launched a theater. You've been a director of theater. For you, across your career, what do you see as the unifying thing? It not just stage acting, not just TV, not just movies, but what do you feel like is kind of the creative thread that you're most interested in?
What a good question. I think about this a lot, actually. I feel a lot of things have come unexpectedly to me in my life, like this podcast or Star Trek, or Labyrinth, all of those. I didn't go after them. Even my teaching, which I love teaching, that happened because my great mentor recommended me to somebody. The people wanted him, but he didn't want to do it, so he recommended me. It was like just sort of by chance, by luck. And I think that I am very curious. I'm a major introvert, which might be surprising, but I really am. I think of life as there's so many parts of it that are like creating art. I feel it's about getting rid of the things that hold me back. And when you're lucky enough to have something come out there, everything I approach, I mean, I don't care if it's a recipe or, what you're doing. There's something about, I have an aesthetic with it. I have a way that I like to approach things. And the more people get to know me, the more they see, oh, that's the way Gates sees things. And it's different from other people, but you start to really get to know it and go, well, that is the way I feel about it, and I'm curious in this way, and these are the movies that I like as opposed to other people like these. The theater I built was so that we could do new plays, really doing issues and exploring things that really interested me. It wasn't ever about my career and making money. Of course, I like all those things, and there are times when I can be very narcissistic about it, but I don't like myself when I'm that way. What I like is when I'm collaborating with people and we're really creating something that is really interesting to me and profoundly, I'm functioning on all cylinders, as it were, and time flies. I don't care if I'm eating, that's like being in heaven when you're engaged in some creative activity, and that's how you're feeling. You're feeling alive completely. And so that's what it is. I think that's, for me, the biggest thing. And I like challenges. I like learning something I don't know how to do. And I guess as much as I don't like failure, I guess I'm willing to risk failure by doing these things. So that's kind of where I am,
Yeah. I know personally those moments of being in creative flow are just wonderful.
They're the best.
They're usually alone, and getting to see someone else really be themselves is kind of a similar moment. And I've loved watching interviews with you and researching for this because there's a silliness and a humor that I don't necessarily expect from Dr. Crusher.
I know. She was so damn serious. Oh, my God. And the joke was that I was the first woman they saw, I think. I was called by my agent, who was this huge fan. I was in L.A. testing for a movie. I went. They said, read any part you want. That's what they said to me. So I look at the women's parts, and I chose the funny scene, and that was Dr. Crusher. And that was about her only funny scene for the whole 7 years or whatever.
The one joke you're going to tell in 7 years.
Yeah, I'm serious. It was, what it was? It was the scene from The Naked Now where I'm drunk on this virus and coming on to Captain Picard. And I thought, oh, I love this kind of silliness. And so that's what I did. That's what got me cast. Do you believe it? And then they said, well, let's not have her do any comedy. So I haven't quite figured that one out yet. But there you go.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for making time today. I can't wait to get to find out who's silly on the podcast and find out more about everybody you know.
Well, thank you, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you aren't going, who is she? Let's get her off. But you might, but I'm learning. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, okay? Take care, Les. Bye.
TV Dudes is an independently run podcast out of Austin, Texas. We are exclusively listener supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/TVDudes.
You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Dudes. All the music for our show is done by our friend and original TV Dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith.
To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com. I'm Randy Lander.
I'm Les Weiler.
And I'm Kyle Scott.
Thanks for listening.